It was under ISIL's control for months, but since the Iraqi city of Tikrit was liberated, Shia armed groups have been accused of looting and attacking Sunni residents. The government is trying to fix what many in the city consider irreparable damage. So what will the government do about its allies as it fights ISIL? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. After 10 months under ISIL's control, the Iraqi city of Tikrit was reclaimed by government troops last week. But that liberation came with a hefty cost. In the month of violence leading up to the government victory, lives were lost and the city now lies in ruins. There's also been widespread reports of the looting of homes and businesses by members of Iraq's Shia militia, as well as attacks on Sunnis and their property. The United States, which helped Iraqi troops retake Tikrit, is calling for an investigation, as is the Iraqi government. Iraq's Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi says ISIL cannot be defeated if it continues to use foreign fighters. He made his comments in an interview with the German magazine Der Spiegel. Abadi also warns governments to do more to protect young people from being recruited to join the armed group. The group of religious leaders in Iraq, known as the Association of Muslim Scholars, has released a lengthy statement condemning the lootings and violence in Tikrit. In it, the organisation says violations and abuses committed by the Popular Mobilization Forces against Iraqi citizens are full crimes of genocide. The group is also accusing Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi of being complicit in these crimes. They're also accusing him of using Iraq as a platform for Iranian expansion in the region. Let's now bring in our guests. In London, Sabah Al-Mukhtar, president of the Arab Lawyers Association. In Baghdad, Mark Kimmitt, a retired US Brigadier General and former chief military spokesman for the coalition forces in Iraq. And in Dubai, Ali Al Dabbagh, former spokesman of the Iraqi government. Gentlemen, welcome to all three of you. Ali Al Dabbagh, what happened in Tikrit? What's gone wrong?
We should not undervalue the great victory, the magnificent victory, which all Iraqis participating, the tribes from Tikrit, the Iraqi security forces, the Popular Mobilization Unit, all they contributed in such a great victory against Daesh, which definitely the Iraqi military forces comes in front. I think this unity shows that there's an enemy which attack all Iraqis, Sunni, Shia, Arab and Kurd. All they become united to defeat such a devil enemy. Unfortunately, what is shadowed now is the looting and the great looting in Tikrit, which at the end, we should not also forget that Daesh had participated in a great destruction, in massive destruction for all the houses and all the infrastructure of the city.
Okay, you talk about unity, but it's not what we were seeing after Daesh, or ISIL, as you say, was forced out. And I know that ISIL committed grave atrocities there, but it was many innocent Sunnis who've been the victim of the Shia forces and their anger.
You see, in the absence of the power of the government or the local power, you could find such, reprisal, such sabotage, such looting. We had experienced this when the fall of the regime in 2003. Most of the cities and the government, all offices and the ministries been looted by the people, by uncontrolled people. We don't deny that the government needs to heavily control now the situation and should not allow any of this popular mobilization to be present in the city, should be out in the camp and should evacuate the city to go on back to their places. to avoid any more friction. You should not forget also there is among the local communities the fact that some of the tribes been supporting Daesh, and definitely that create a great friction among the local communities in Tikrit, which at the end also it makes this. For the looting issue, I just want to mention that it is not easy to loot a massive and heavy equipment such like home appliances, such as like furniture. For the military, it's not easy to handle this. It's not easy to move them to Baghdad or any other places. I'm quite sure that there are people which need to be punished, need to be questioned. Everybody in Iraq, including His Eminence, Great Eminence Ayatollah Sistani in the Jum'ah prayer, had condemned all the looting and the human rights violation against anyone, any innocent people, innocent or non-innocent. It is not the job of the people or the militias to punish the people. It is the job of the government and the local authorities to take control and to find ways how to reconcile with the local communities there in order to go ahead and not to look for the back.
Sabah Al-Mukhtar, what do you think of the destruction that happened there during ISIL times, and particularly what happened after ISIL were kicked out by the Shia forces supported by the government?
Well, I think there is the presumption that there was looting and there was a destruction during the time that ISIS was in Tikrit. That's not borne by the facts. But what's borne by the facts are the Hashd al-Shabi and the army and the police and the government forces carrying refrigerators, driving cars, bicycles, furniture, taking everything from the town, burning houses. There are pictures. I think there is the continuing deception, self-deception by the government, whereby they don't seem to want to know that when the Prime Minister says that Daesh cannot be defeated because of the foreign forces, he better look at what he's doing. He's called on the Americans formally to come to their assistance so that they can defeat Daesh. He's called on the Iranians. He had Qasem Soleimani running the show there for a long time. And yet, at the same time, he's worried about some fighters who comes from different parts of the world to assist Daesh. This is a self-deception situation. The facts on the grounds are that there is a sectarian regime which is practicing sectarian processes and being fought by another sectarian force, which is ISIS. ISIS and the government of Abadi are exactly on the same agenda, but they are on opposing sides. We have seen the pictures, Labbaika Khamenei, which is the signs that were written on the wall. We've seen the degree of destruction in the city. This is the facts on the ground. The idea that somehow we try and say that it was condemned by the Prime Minister and by Sistani. At the same time, it was condemned by the members of parliament, by 2 vice presidents. But when one looks at the situation, either Abadi does not have control over the thing, or he has control of the thing, of these militias, and he is part of it. And in both instances, whether he is in control or he is not, he is personally responsible for all the human rights abuses that are taking place there, because this is simply a genocidal attitude which is being done by both the militias, who are under the control of Hadi al-Amiri, who's a member of parliament, who's the leader of the Badr Brigade, to which the Prime Minister Abadi is a member. So the whole thing is a fictional idea that we talk about one thing, but the facts on the ground are absolutely the opposite to that.
Mark Kimmitt, what do you think the facts on the ground suggest? I know that the US has called for an investigation into what happened in Tikrit. What are you hearing?
Well, first of all, I would associate myself with Ali Al Dabbah's comments, and I think your previous speaker isn't aware of the facts on the ground. Clearly, he hasn't been anywhere near that. I don't know what level of knowledge he has of the situation, but this is clear. Number one, yes, the Popular Movement forces did participate in the operations inside Tikrit. It is clear that there has been some measure of what in some cases could be considered war crimes and others could be considered looting and reprisal attacks that has gone on. It is clear that both the United States and the government of Iraq has asked for an investigations, but it's also clear that we've got to put this against the context of the near slavery and genocidal conditions that were being perpetuated upon the people of Tikrit by ISIL. ISIL was not running some sort of Mesopotamian Garden of Eden while they were there. The reason there were very few reports of what was happening inside of Tikrit was because any reporters that got anywhere near that were at fear of death. I think the few pictures that did come out showed the massive destruction conducted by the ISIL forces, by the Daesh forces, the killing that has been documented, clearly documented by this genocidal group called Daesh, clearly indicates that the balance of terrorism, the balance of murder is clearly overweighted on the side of Daesh.
But
and
none of that
Daesh,
justifies what we saw, excuse me, jumping in here, none of that justifies the attacks that we saw on Sunnis, many innocent Sunni people, by the Shia militias who are working alongside the government, and the government accused of turning a blind eye.
And Jane, nobody is suggesting for a moment that we should turn a blind eye and justify that. That's why the Americans, that's why the coalition, that's why the Prime Minister of Iraq has called for investigations. I hear no such calls for investigations coming out of al-Baghdadi and his gang of murderous thugs. So let's keep this in balance and understand that the popular movement forces, some that were acting with the support of Baghdad, some of those that weren't acting with the support, again, and it is clear what is going on, and it's a tilt towards somehow favoring Daesh and what they were doing inside of Tikrit, and I find that reprehensible.
Sabah, you want to say something?
Yes, if the reference point that Kimmitt is using is he's better than, or the Hashd al-Sha'bi is better than ISIS, God forgive us, help us, because this is not a reference point to take. So if you are better than ISIS, that doesn't make you good. Come on, what are you talking about? It doesn't matter. Nobody said ISIS is good. But if you are, all what you can refer to is that they are not as bad as ISIS, then that is a very crazy way of measuring how you run things.
Well, that's your misinterpretation of what I said. What I said very clearly was that investigations should be held, and those that either looted or killed in reprisal killings should be brought to the full extent of justice. That's what needs to be done by a responsible government, and that's exactly what the government of Prime Minister Al Abadi is calling for, as is the coalition.
Okay, you talk about a responsible government.
Coming out of Daesh.
You talk about a responsible government. Ali, I mean, was this a responsible government? The government had seen how the Shia forces had been operating up to the liberation of Tikrit, and yet nothing was done. Shouldn't the government have done more to make sure that there was some sort of security, that they'd planned ahead, planned to the departure of ISIL?
Sure. The government of Iraq needs to have a pre-plan, should think about the post-liberating of Daesh, that normally when there is an absence of the power, that looting could come, reprisal could happen, and that needs, of course, government is fully responsible for that. And I think that Haider al-Abadi is taking the full responsibility and doing well by calling all the security forces, the local police, to control the Tikrit, as well as the military, Iraqi military forces, to help them and supporting them in control. It is ridiculous to say about the popular mobilization who had participated heavily. And without them, we couldn't liberate Tikrit. Without the American support, definitely, we couldn't liberate. Without Iraqi and the tribes of the Tikrit, we couldn't liberate Tikrit, as well as the coming Mosul or Al-Anbar. We should not downvalue with what happened now. Definitely nobody justify whatever happened. Killing Sunni, innocent or non-innocent. It is not the job of any party to punish or to bring anyone to justice. Only the government is responsible for that, and anyone who is doing, I think Haider al-Abadi fully responsible to provide the full security for the Tikrit now, and I think he's doing well and doing all his job. It is unfair to call Haider al-Abadi that he's not doing anything. No, he's calling the people, but keep in mind, the situation in Iraq politically and security is so fragile. In the normal circumstances, the government had lost the control in some areas. Okay. So you could imagine that when the post-Daesh destruction, it is not easy. It is just a few days.
Okay,
only
gentlemen,
it is 3-4 days. Yes.
I'd like to just take a quick look at where we are at the moment, how we got to where we got to in Tikrit, and look at the geographical significance of this gain by Iraq's military. Now, the city of Tikrit lies around 180 kilometers north of the capital, Baghdad. It was taken by ISIL in June. Iraqi forces managed to take back the city after several weeks of intense fighting, and say ISIL has been pushed back around 45 kilometers. The Iraqi army now has its sights set on the city of Mosul, ISIL's most significant stronghold in Iraq. Mark, seeing what we saw in Tikrit, it doesn't bode too well for Mosul, does it? And I'm talking about what happens if and when they push out ISIL.
Well, Jane, that's under the presumption that the spearhead forces for any continued operations in Anbar or further north up into Mosul will be the Popular Mobilization Forces. I think it's important to note that while the Tikrit operation is going on, in the background, there's a significant coalition training activity going on to try to train 9 to 12 brigades of both Kurdish Peshmerga and Iraqi security forces answerable directly to Baghdad that will probably be the mainstay of the forces going into Mosul. I would agree that there is always a concern when militias are used in place of forces that answer to the central government. It is unfortunate that that's what had to be used in the near term, but in the long term, I think we're going to see a restoration of the government and the government alone holding the monopoly on the use of force and using Iraqi security forces and not the Iraqi popular mobilization or militia forces as the spearhead.
And of course, you're going to have to share the spoils, haven't you? I mean, you can't have possibly Sunni soldiers only reporting to Shia commanders.
No, this has got to be the Iraqi security forces, not the Sunni security forces, not the Shia, not the Kurdish security forces. These have got to be forces loyal to the nation of Iraq and to an integrated nation of Iraq that works together without resorting to sectarianism.
But how do you avoid sectarianism, Sabah, if I can bring you in here, when you touched on Iran a little bit earlier on? I mean, it seems that the gestures we've seen from Haidar al-Abadi is more towards the Shia military forces and towards Iran than towards the Sunnis who feel that they don't have a role to play politically and from a military point of view.
Well, certainly this is the creation of the Americans when they came in 2003 and they divided Iraq into, there are no Arabs in Iraq. There are Shiites, there are Sunnis, and there are Kurds. And they divided power between them. They created, they helped, they assisted, they supported this division on a sectarian and ethnic grounds. We talk about a government in Iraq. The government is a virtual government. It has no control over Kurdistan. It has no control over the north. It has no control over the west. It has control over Baghdad to a certain degree. That's why we see every day terrorist acts, which is killing civilians, killing innocent people. This is a virtual government. When we talk about the Americans wishing to train an army, we've seen them training an army for 10 years and spending trillions of dollars on them, only to run away in about 3 hours in front of I don't know how many hundred terrorists of ISIS. For them to think that they can create an army now and it becomes a national army under a sectarian government, and they train them in 6 months so that they create a fighting force, I think this is a lot of wishful thinking. I hope they are right, but I don't think it is. And any sensible person will see through this. This is only talk. This is just like when we talk about the investigation of anything, crimes or otherwise. We've seen for the last 15 years, not a single incident was investigated and anything came out of it. Whether it was terrorist acts, whether it was corruption, whether it was terrorism or whatever. This is a myth that is buying time. Abadi he's running the show, but at the same time he is calling on people who don't listen to him. He's saying you should stop pilferage, killing and putting signs and what have you. Now the Hajj al-Shabi is moved from Tikrit because there is nothing left to steal.
Let me put some of those points you made to Ali. I mean, Haidar al-Abadi promised reconciliation. What you saw in Tikrit didn't look like reconciliation. It could have frightened some people off. Sabah is saying that what we're seeing actually is a virtual government. What do you make of that?
I think Maliki had participated heavily in destroying the military, which has been built in the loyal. They were loyal. They We had experienced a good security forces, an accepted level of security forces in Iraq, but Maliki, unfortunately, he had brought those corrupted, highly corrupted military leaders, and he kept them in power. That is when you could find that there is a big gap between the military forces and the Mosul people there, that you could find that in a few hours the thing being collapsed, as well as in Salah ad-Din. I think that at the period of Maliki, it was very difficult and hard for Iraqis, as Maliki had deepened that sectarian feeling among the Sunni, the anger feeling among the Sunnis, which at the end lead to welcoming Daesh in some of the places to a certain extent. But now I think Haider al-Abadi is trying to rehabilitate, trying to repair all the damages been doing. I think we have no choice, either to allow Daesh to control Iraq and to do whatever we can. With the help of friends, Americans, Iranians, any Arab nations, all the security Iraqi forces, whatever, in order to defeat Daesh, then we'll find the way how to reconcile. Reconciliation is very important, not only among the Sunnis and the Shia, no, not only that, but among the local communities, which again, one more time, I'm saying that Daesh had participated in deepen the great differences among them. This is what Abadi needs to do immediately in order to protect the national unity of the country.
Mark, you were also talking about the national unity and particularly of the military. The US Joint Chiefs Chairman Martin Dempsey, after his trip to Iraq, said that the sectarian divide could cause Sunni Arab members of the coalition fighting ISIL, Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf countries to bolt. So where does the relationship between the US and Iran in what's happening in Iraq play into this bigger picture?
Well, if you're talking about the relations that seem to be somewhat improving based on the recent nuclear accords, I don't really think that's going to play
but the US also worked
that
with
much on the ground
Iran
here
in Iraq. I said there was also a deepening relationship between the US and Iran when it comes to fighting ISIL in Iraq.
There's no relationship at all. There's no coordination, no communication that goes on between the U.S. forces and Qasem Soleimani or any of his forces at all. So I wouldn't consider that to be a deepening relationship. There is no relationship.
So how are you going to bring success to Iraq if you don't have a relationship with Iran then? If you maybe don't do it directly, but through Iraqi forces?
But I think Ali mentioned it. I think that's exactly right, Jane. I think Ali mentioned it quite well. Frankly, you've got to give Prime Minister Abadi credit for leveraging both the U.S. military and support from the Iranians at the same time. I don't think that anybody else could have pulled off that feat, where you get two countries who have significantly different objectives inside of Iraq and, quite frankly, throughout the region, operating to the advantage of the Iraqi government at the same time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is a triangle, that we, the United States, have got a deepening relationship with Iran inside of Iraq. There is no relationship. The relationship is with the government of Iraq. It may well be that Iran has a relationship with the government of Iraq, but that's separate and distinct from what we see on the battlefield.
And Sabah, you were wanting to get involved there, shaking your head. What's the problem?
Don't listen to me. Listen to Netanyahu. What did he say in Congress? He said to the American administration, you're getting in bed with the Iranians is not a good sign. So for us to start saying, well, it's a deal and it's not a deal and it's this and that and the other, the Iranians have been using heavy weapons. They had the Qasem Soleimani there. The U.S., when they discussed with Abadi, they said, we will only help you provided that the Iranians get out of there. And they told them that unless the heavy machinery is moved, they will be bombed by the Americans. So the idea that somehow the Americans and the Iranians are not working together, of course they don't like each other. But they are tactically at the present moment, because the Americans have this fixation which is called ISIS. The only problem in the world is ISIS. That's why they convinced 60 countries, including one in the North Pole, which is Canada, and one in the South Pole, which is Australia, to take part. We in Britain have taken part in that one, when we only have 6 airplanes in Cyprus that flies over Turkey and then over the north for a few hours and come back. And we, the taxpayers in England, are paying for this crap talk about it when we're trying to fight ideology from the air.
Let's leave it there. Sabah Al-Mukhtar with those Final words in Baghdad, Mark Kimmitt, and in Dubai, Ali Al Dabbagh. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And thank you very much for joining us. If you've got anything you'd like to add, go to our programme page at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or send your tweets to @AJ Inside Story and @Jane Dutton. From the whole team here, goodbye.